So I'm here for Veterans Legislative Voice, and where I would like to talk more about the military and veterans issues when it comes to public policy. Usually, when I come in as the AHG correspondent, I usually come in and do more of a generalized politics commentary. As for Veterans Legislative Voice, you can look me up on Facebook, Instagram, and I'm on Twitter, or X, excuse me, and my website, Veteran Legislative Voice. You can see it's VETS, legislativevoice.org. And there I try to simplify what military and veterans issues are like in public policy. May it be, executive orders, judicial action, Supreme Court or district, those type of things, and also legislative. Legislative is usually my main point, but that's mostly because that's where most of it happens and most talked about. So now, what are we going to talk about today? Well, this month is the second anniversary of the PACT Act, or i.e. the Honoring Our PACT Act. That was actually signed into law August 10th, 2020 by President Biden. Now, what is the PACT Act? If you're not aware and you haven't called into the VA anytime soon, you haven't heard in the beginning of the whole thing when you call in and you want to know about the PACT Act, press whatever key. The Honoring Our PACT Act is actually like the Agent Orange bill that was passed years ago. It establishes presumptive conditions mostly for those that went to Gulf War and post 9/11 wars. It also added a few more conditions for Agent Orange, and it did a whole lot of other things, like opening up a bigger eligibility window for those, that deployed for post 9/11 wars, and so that they can actually enroll into the VA. If you're not aware, you have a timeline on enrolling in the VA for any type of healthcare. You don't. If you just get out of the military, you can enroll. You may have to pay copays if you don't already have a VA disability, and if you don't enroll by that time frame, you're going to need at least a 0% VA disability. 0 means you're not having any symptoms or issues with the condition, but you have the medical condition and it was established as service-connected. Sorry, a lot of jargon. Have to add that in there. If you didn't already know, I used to work in VA disability as well, worked for a law firm, and also used to help with veterans on filing their VA disability. So there's a lot of jargon in there. Google it if you need it. There's a lot of support. It'll help you out. So the Honoring Our PACT Act, that was passed 2 years ago, signed by President Biden again, and it actually established a ton of things. So it established a whole load of cancers that's possibly connected to toxic exposures to burn pits. And it included a whole lot of locations as well, including like Somalia and other places, Djibouti, Saudi Arabia, a lot of places, Horn of Africa. So if anyone had deployed in those areas, definitely apply for it. There is some sort of confusion of whether people that had deployed to Bosnia are included, but there were burn pits in Bosnia. So as those that I know of and spoken to, definitely apply, try to provide the evidence of the burn pits, and when in doubt, apply and keep appealing to keep the actual claim alive, because you don't know when the VA is going to change. Because recently the VA changed and included those that deployed to K2. I believe that was in Uzbekistan for Operation Iraqi, or in Afghanistan, for Afghanistan. So those things will be updated and added as they come along, and the VA will add it to there. So once they add them and you keep the claim alive, you keep the initial date alive, so you can get a bigger back pay. So FYI on all of that. So the biggest thing about the Honoring Our PACT Act is definitely for VA disability. Over 1 million veterans have gotten their claims approved now under the Honoring Our PACT Act. So that's amazing and it's big. One of the coolest things about it is that they basically kept a very broad amount of conditions. So if you have cancers of any kind, reproductive cancers, lung cancers, any of those, they didn't specifically list each individual cancer like they did with Agent Orange. So it gave it a lot more room for our veterans to actually get approved. It's not an automatic approval like most people do think with presumptive conditions. They still do have to evaluate, make sure the service connection is there, make sure that's listed underneath these cancers, and go through the process. So it's not like, oh, hey, they deployed, this is the cancer, approve, move on. There's still got to do the process. And it has caused some backlog because, of course, a lot of people became eligible. So if 1 million veterans have been approved, imagine how many haven't been approved and also filed. I say maybe 3 times that and got processed. You are going to have some errors in the denials, which happens because it's still human error. And there might be people that are handling the claims that are not sure of what they're doing. And that's why you always have to file an appeal. Please don't judge on the VA on a single issue and a single thing that happens in a single event, because it does not represent the whole. So please just keep appealing and keep filing. One of the things I do want to bring up with the Honoring Our PACT Act, it happened 2 years ago. So many people may not remember what has happened in the whole drama of it getting approved. So to give you a little bit of backstory about the Honoring Our PACT Act, I need to talk about something else that connects to this. So during President Trump's term, they had passed a bill, an act, to basically study all of the facilities for the VA, make sure that all of the facilities are in the right places, and they're supposed to try to predict where the veterans populations will decline and also increase throughout the United States. This was called the AIM Commission. What it does is basically try to give the VA a snapshot of where they should downgrade facilities, or at least try to make them smaller, because the population of those areas for the veterans will decline. So they don't need as many staff and as much things there to support those veterans, and what areas they need to increase, because there would be an increase of veterans there. Florida is a very big one because a lot of people have been moving to Florida here. Thanks. Because since COVID, a lot of people have been moving here, and it's pretty common. It's a very common place for veterans. Other places that have been increasing in veteran population lately has been Texas and also Arizona. Unlikely ones have also been in other states that actually do have some more veterans benefits that people may not know of, like exceptions for property tax, other things like that. So that will also drive a bit of the veterans populations around. And so if you look those up, you'll see where those have been moving when they look up where more benefits they could get, wherever they could move to. And so when the report came out, President Biden was in office when the AIM Commission had published its report and said which facilities should actually close, should downgrade, and basically get smaller, and which facilities should be increased in facility manpower, or facilities built and created and located in areas where there will be veterans population increases. This actually caused a uproar on many veteran organizations because they didn't want their facilities to close down or downgrade. And that, of course, can cause a lot of issues, and a lot of politicians got involved here. They're closing my VA, and they're getting really mad about this type of stuff without actually understanding that their population in that area was predicted to actually get smaller and to decline. So you're not going to need as much staff, in the next 10 to 12 years, and that's going to happen. The other part of it, if for those that are not aware, for the veterans populations, the veteran population has been declining at a rapid rate. That is because World War II veterans have now mostly passed. There's only a very few, very small population of those people. And then the Korean War veterans, the very small population of those people, really on a whole, there was a lot less people, a fraction of people that deployed to Korean War versus World War II. And now it's the Vietnam War veterans. Majority of those people are passing away. And that's mostly because of the devastation of Agent Orange and the toxic exposure to that. So their death rates are at a higher rate at a very lower age. So we are decreasing in our veteran population at least 1 million a year. So we are going to have a declining population of veterans, especially in the next 10 to 15 years. There will be no more World War II living World War II veterans. There will be no more living Korean War veterans, and there will be a fraction of the living Vietnam veteran populations. And then after that, we have a huge gap because the Cold War was not an actual war that they could use for wartime benefits. So there is a gap on how many veterans actually do use the VA for that time frame. And then we have the small population of the Gulf War veterans, peacetime veterans, and then the post 9/11 veterans. So there will be a declining veteran population that's going to be going out there. So how does this relate to the Honoring Our PACT Act? Well, the AIM Commission recommendations was actually canceled completely. After the recommendations were made, the next step would be for Congress to go through and then try to pick which facilities would be closed, which facilities would be created. Since the uproar that happened, they decided to cancel it altogether. And this was technically mentioned in Project 2025. If those are interested in that subject, that was slightly referenced, not by name. And they also left out the fact that a large number of Republicans actually fought for canceling the AIM Commission and against closing VA facilities, FYI. So the Project 2025 did blame the Veterans Affairs Committees of the House, well, not technically which chamber of Congress, but just broadly in Congress. And so they canceled it, and that caused some negative effects, because when you cancel it as a whole, that means you also cancel the creation of facilities where you need the facilities for growing veterans populations. It also cancels where they just need facilities already. So it caused a lot of negative effects, and often more negative effects than positive effects. Again, how does this relate to the Honoring Our PACT Act? Well, after the Honoring Our PACT Act was passed by the Senate and the House, for those that want to look it up, it's Senate Bill 3373. Yes, I have that memorized. I know. It's okay. And you can look that up on congress.gov, Senate Bill 3373. If you're interested, you can Google it by that number and it should automatically pop up. And it includes the entire text of the bill. It also includes all of the steps that it took to get to pass, including the roll call of everyone's votes on whether to pass it or to not. Why is that important? I'll tell you. Well, after the initial part of the bill passed, and it included the majority of the text that we know of today, the eligibility, the enrollment window, the added of all the presumptive conditions. The Senate added, after the AIM Commission was canceled, they added money to then create facilities for the VA. I believe it's around 400 million. I can't be sure, but I would like, give me a little bit of leeway on that one. Is a lot of money. And specifically had how much money goes to what type of facility in what location. Why am I going into this detail? I'll tell you. So once this bill, this portion gets added to the bill, the Senate brings it up to a vote, because once you change a bill, even though both chambers have approved it, and then you add another amendment, both sides of of Congress has to still approve it again. If there's any changes, it has to go back to the other chamber, and the original chamber that made the edits needs to approve it. So they added it, and a section of the Senate decided to vote against it. These people are all Republicans. There are people like Senator Pat Toomey and Senator Ted Cruz, and a good number of other ones, and you can look that up in the roll call. This happened on August 2nd. I believe that was on the action log that's under congress.gov for that bill. And they voted against the bill. Why did they vote against the bill? They said that the funding that was added was a loophole to add pork barrel spending in their states, and that the funding was not going to go to veterans. Now, is this true or not? Absolute lie. You can look it up on congress.gov yourself, and it actually includes how much money, where the facilities are going, what type of facility, and every single one of them was for a Veterans Affairs medical facility. Sounds like it's going to go to veterans, right? Yeah. So this was happening under the guise that they said that it would pork barrel spending to make the Democrats look bad. It also, you know what? It gives President Biden a win. If he signs this bill, he can add this to his successes. So it's one of those political moves to try to rile up their own base, to get them to be angry and believe that the opposite party is completely against what you stand for and what's important to you. Now, they lied. Can they lie? Are they allowed to lie? I referenced this in the last segment that I was in, the speech and debate clause. It basically gives them constitutional protection to say whatever they want to say in their official position and not get charged for anything, for lying, defamation, perjury, anything. So a lot of people believe, hey, politicians lie all the time. It's because it's actually their constitutional right to say whatever they want to say and not get prosecuted for it, which in itself, in the way that it is, in the core of the speech and debate clause, it's a great protection. In the way that people tend to use it as a weapon, absolutely terrible. Very notable senator actually used this to his own gain and actually gained a lot of notoriety for it. Senator Joe McCarthy. Look that one up. He absolutely lied against many of his opponents and many of the people that were against him on the things that he wanted to do, and he was completely protected by the speech and debate clause. You might know that name, and you might know about the whole communism fight that was happening and all of the headhunting that was happening back in the 50s. Please look that up. He was completely protected on whatever lie he said. And a lot of people still tend to use that as their own protection and their own weapon to do things. Senator Pat Toomey was also about to retire of Pennsylvania, and Senator Fetterman actually replaced him. So that type of thing is pretty important to know in context when you are going to vote. Now, of course, you're not going to vote for Senator Toomey anymore. But who are you going to vote for? A lot of people are going to go to the election poll stations for? Senator Ted Cruz. They have a video of him fist bumping another senator from Montana, Republican, not John Tester. I cannot remember the name for the life of me. But he fist bumped another Republican senator after voting nay and basically delaying the approval of that bill for our veterans. Pretty bad, it looks pretty terrible. And Senator Ted Cruz is running for election again this year for Texas. So I wanted to let everybody know this is what he kind of did already. And his opponent, current Representative Colin Allred, he's running against Ted Cruz for that Senate seat. He voted for the PACT Act and voted for many different veterans bills because he actually was part of the Veterans Affairs Committee in the House. He's a very knowledgeable person that knows a lot of things about veterans. If he does make it into the Senate, I definitely think he would be part of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and he would be a great addition because he really does understand what goes on for veterans, and he's always been a really great advocate for veterans. Definitely look him up and definitely research him on what he does. Senator Ted Cruz is not a very popular person. His approval rate is very low, but he still leads Representative Colin Allred in the polls. So just definitely look up who you're going to vote for, or, trying to decide and vote against. That's the reason why I keep Senator Ted Cruz as an example. He's the most glaring example for research before you go to the ballot stations, the polling stations, so you can cast your vote. Definitely double check on any website that you go on. Make sure it's an official ones. And write a list before you get to the ballot station, because usually I will not remember every single person, because not only are you voting for the president, your senator, and your House representative, you're also voting for your local officials. Local officials like the city council, judges for a lot of locations. You need to know what you're going to be understanding and knowing when you go to the ballot station. There's about I think the longest I've seen when I've gone to vote was about 34 different positions I had to vote for, and that was in Washington State, and that was wild. And places like Washington State will give you a nice little pamphlet that has information on everybody. It has their background, their resume, or if you know what CV means, their curriculum vitae. So you can get a lot of really good information on these people, but you don't get things like what they voted for, what they advocated for, what policies they said they are actually against. Look those things up and you'll really understand a lot of different things. Ballotopedia is a really good website for you to use, and you can find out who's running in your areas, who pretty much how they fared in their previous elections as well, if their previous elections were really close or really great. And you can also see who they ran against, because honestly, I judge how well they did on the election on who they ran against. Again, with my state, with Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis ran against a very not liked former governor, Charlie Crist, who used to be my House representative, who was well liked as the representative, but he was not well liked as a governor as a whole. And he was only a one-term governor. He couldn't make it to the second term. He tried for his second term against Governor Ron DeSantis, who blew him out of the water. But that's mostly because people just disliked him more than they did DeSantis. We'll see how that all plays out. Definitely judge how those things work out, and definitely do your research. Google the websites you're looking at. I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, but I want to make sure that you guys understand all the resources you need so you can make the most educated decision for what's really important for our democracy and how we live our lives in America today. It's very important because a lot of people have a lot of power that we don't realize. A lot of people do blame the president as a whole for a lot of things that are wrong today. But the problem is that the president really doesn't have all of that power. A lot of people are upset about the interest rate. The Federal Reserve the Federal Reserve is not technically under the president's purview. He can hire and fire, but firing can also be a little bit of a gray area. He can hire, but then Congress appoints them. And then after that, he has no control over the Federal Reserve, and they can do whatever they want to do within reason. So definitely look up on how things really work out there. Study everything that you can, and always take things at a grain of salt.